sorry. Welcome to Work Legally and Ethically, CHCLEG001. Just let's go in here, and we have Vicky here from HADA, who will now lead us into this and discuss a few of the outcomes over the last morning.
Great. Thanks so much, Deb, for inviting me into your class and all your learners. So I'll do acknowledgement to country. So I'm Vicky Hanna from HADA. I'm the program manager in this space. So acknowledgement of country for HADA is a really special moment. It's a sacred moment that we take before each class. So I sit on Tarraballan Bundaland, often known as Bundaberg. So in the spirit of reconciliation, HADA Institute of Education acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the first inhabitants of this nation and the traditional custodians on the land on which we work, live and study, and those lands have never been ceded. We express our gratitude for the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal and spiritual and cultural costs of that sharing, and hope that we may move forward together in harmony and in a spirit of healing. We pay our respects to all First Nation people and acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, and all our learners who identify as First Nation or Torres Strait Island. So, Deb, I'll leave housekeeping for you, if you like, or
yes.
For you to be able to go through. So just very briefly before we jump in, I just wanted to thank everyone for the feedback that you gave Deb last night. It's so valuable. Deb had a meeting with me this morning and we talked about what might be some of the strategies that you wanted us to apply. Trainers change quite constantly when you're working in virtual classrooms. The richness that comes from that means that you're going to get lots of different experiences. So when you've got a different trainer and they pop into that space, they're going to give you a different perspective. And that is exactly what our workplaces are like. So for some of you are hoping to enter into the community service sector, then a lot of this information will be new to you and you're definitely meeting those practice standards that are required. Then there's learners in this program and any of the other programs and classes and qualifications that we teach across 4 nights a week and the 17 different classes that we run across those 4 nights, and all different trainers in that space. Those who are working in the sector, this is professional development. Your why might be, I need that qualification. I want to be a subject matter expert in that field. You're doing mental health, but you're doing non-clinical mental health. So some of your units are core units and lots of trainers can teach and map across those areas. So I might jump into tonight, I'm doing AOD, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I deliver all of the youth work qualifications. So every single trainer that you have is highly experienced and skilled and has that industry knowledge. Myself, I work outside of HADA. I run a residential program. I oversee national boards that are running in housing and homelessness areas. I work on a sexual assault board, a women's domestic family violence board, and I also sit in the Street Law, which is a non-government organisation providing legal services to people, mostly homeless people, our most vulnerable in the community. So for us, your feedback landed softly in a team meeting. And what was it that we were really hoping to be able to do for you? So Deb is going to lead you into all of the tasks. The other area that we're looking at is, and the feedback that came, some confusion around when your tasks are due, when you are doing role plays, how do you do role plays? So every qualification has between 11 and 14 role plays throughout your certificate 4. There's about 4 of those that you will do in front of an assessor in real time. The rest you do as the instructions say. Family member, friend, somebody. If you don't have someone, then you can improvise as if hypothetically there was someone there. The other person is not being assessed in a role play. You are. Your skills, we have a checklist. We encourage you if we're in that space with you, but your instructions are there. It will actually say the assessor will be looking for, and they're the things that you need to. If you are recording yourself and you're doing that on an MP4, it uploads really easily. There's instructions in your learner portal on how to do that. So you do your recording, and if it says 5 minutes, then it's 5 minutes. If it's 10, then you didn't meet the brief. If it says 15 and you do 3, you didn't meet the brief. So you need to read your questions and follow the instructions. And if you need support to be able to do that, there is actually an instruction in your learner's portal on how to do role plays. But when you're in class, it's not online class. It's a virtual classroom environment that's being created. So your relevant discussions about the task, what that means, how you roll that out, absolutely amazing. That peer recognition, peer support, the collective wisdom that happens in our classes is strongly encouraged. It needs to be relevant to the task that you're doing, the unit that you are concentrating on. Your trainer is there, and in this case, Deb, who is highly skilled and very experienced in this sector, is going to guide you through that. But about 75% of your content comes from classes, rich discussions, and about 25% comes from your learner's guide and the research that you're going to do independently as an adult learner. Every learner gets 1 hour per month with a trainer, one-on-one. May not be your trainer, or you may need to wait a little longer for that, but you've got a booking system in your portal, and you can book a one-on-one with your trainer. You can do every fortnight, have a 30 minutes and make it task specific. It'll be a call based around that. If you send an email, it needs to be really clear. So Deb will be teaching more than one class, as many of our trainers do. So your email would say, "Hi Deb, I need some help with CHCLEG001, task 3 and task 4. Then put your question in your email. So that's how Deb can assist you in the question that you've got. But if you say, Deb, I'm stuck on question 5, Deb does not know which unit, which qualification, because she teaches others, and is unable to assist you. So that email won't get a reply, simply because the information isn't there to be able to help you. And we want to. So you need to be able to be clear in how you do that. And Deb will coach you. This session that we're doing now is to show you how to get the best out of Hader and your learning. So from this, you have a copy of the learner's guide in your portal. You also have a copy of the slides that Deb presents. So Deb will add richness to that and industry relevance. This is what they're looking for here. This is what it means there. The whole of your class is recorded. So your language, your conversation, that respectful relationship you have in there must be relevant to the topic that's being discussed. So in breakout rooms, that is not recorded and people can speak freely. I ask you not to put your private conversations into chat, because there's learners who are in there in real time, but there's also a lot of learners who never come to class, and that is a private conversation. It does breach the Privacy Act. So you can contact somebody, but it's actually being recorded. So just be really mindful about that. How you reach out to each other outside of class, absolutely, that's your zone. But in class and that recording, we don't have consent to share that information from you out to other people in a recording. And we follow the federal, so the Commonwealth Privacy Act, and we also cover the State and Territory Act around privacy. So be really mindful. Respectful relationship is in safe wording that we use and what we write. And the language must be, hi everyone, I'm heading out early, or I'm staying in. I might do a check-in. You might congratulate someone and say, thanks, I enjoyed hearing that. Those things are respectful relationships and recorded, and that's fine. You will have 2 breaks during the night. You will have a 10-minute break and you will have another 10-minute break. And your breakout rooms will be no longer than 15 minutes, and you will not be recorded. But when you jump into a breakout room, you will go in with a task to do, and you will come out reporting those tasks. So one person will be a spokesperson, and you'll bring that out and you'll say, what are the key learnings? Sometimes learners go off track a little bit, which is great because you're doing peer support, a little bit of debriefing, and that's amazing. You're building relationships, exactly what you would do if you were in a classroom situation or in the workplace. However, Deb's going to want from you 3 key learnings that you took from that, and possibly an unexpected, gosh, I did not know. That's what I discovered in that space. The breakout rooms are for the purpose of discussion, to be able to demonstrate a task that is being delivered, and with the legal and ethical framework, because I'm a court support worker and I'm an advocate that sits in the space of domestic family violence and the youth duty justice side of things. So a lot of repeat offenders in that space. So what we say, you're learning about legal and ethical framework, you will have dilemmas from time to time. The legal says what we must do. The ethical would be what we could do. However, what always is that overarching for you is the legal requirements. You enter into the workplace, you make an agreement, it's a lawful contract that you sign, and as a sector worker, then you need to be well prepared. We have a duty of care to send you out with knowledge, skills, and understanding. And some of the processes that we have to help you with that, you're going to see in Deb's classes. If you've got a question and you're not sure, then please email Deb, and Deb can share with me, or you can email myself. So all HADA trainers have a similar email tag. So I am viki@hadainstitute.edu.au. But if you circle that back to how do we communicate with people when we've got something that's bothering us, you amazingly did that with Deb last night, and I thank you. And Deb's got her key takeaways from that and some recommendations from our end, and she's been kind enough to invite me in the beginning of this where I can say thank you for that, and we absolutely are going to respond and meet your expectations. I want you to speak comfortably and freely with Deb, not recorded and not in written word. So none of those can go out as well. So it's really important. So a lot of learners are never going to come into class because they've got conflicting priorities, or they're more comfortable watching a recording in their own time. You're all adult learners, and we want you to find your way to do that. So when it comes to booking a role play, if it says must be done in front of an assessor or a learner, the assessor and trainer does not know when you're ready to do that unit, because we do rolling starts. So if you're waiting for a trainer to organise your role play, we don't know that you're ready to do that particular role play, that particular unit, or that particular task. So that's actually for you to say, send an email out, I'm ready to do this role play. If it requires a group, we capture enough of you that say, I'm ready to do this role play. Let's say it's CHCLEG001, task 3, facilitate a meeting. Well, that takes at least 4 learners. So as soon as people email and say, I'm ready to do that, and here are my 3 best available times, that gives us an idea on how that will work. So nights are always full. Some days are available. However, we also work and take bookings for role plays on Saturdays and Sundays. So we know what units we're delivering, what we're recording, and it may be myself, or it may be another trainer, and very soon it may be Deb as well. So it's on you as a learner to say, I'm ready. We're not going to pressure you and say, hurry up, you've got to do this. We're not going to do that. We are going to say, we're here for you when you are ready. Please let us know. Okay. So Deb, is that enough? You want?
That's fantastic. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll jump out and get out of your way. I want to say thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. And it absolutely, Deb and I had a meeting this morning. We're going to have another one. She's got some suggestions, but that all comes from you. And we really need that feedback in a respectful and professional way so that we can meet your expectations as a HADA learner. So Deb, I'll hand it over to you and go.
Thank you.
Anytime anybody needs something, then just please, when you're doing the chat, if you like, you can drop my email into there and share that. I'm happy to do that. I work full time. I'm around and I'm very responsive. If you send me an email or you contact our learner support team, lso@haiderinstitute.edu.au, they will circle that back to me and say, Vicky, can you take care of that? Okay, so I'll check out and I'll leave you to it. I'll just leave, Deb.
Thank
And I
you.
look forward to hearing how tonight's class goes for you again. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Vicky. Well, thank you very much for that, Vicky. Now we're looking at the welcome area here. So as Vicky mentioned, we have class break times between 7 and 7:10. We have 8 and 8:10 too. Now, as you know from last night, you need to remind me of that because I get on a roll and I look up and it's like, 11 o'clock or something. So please remind me of that. There are no smoking or vaping. We wouldn't ask anything of our learners that we wouldn't expect in industry. And cameras on, please. So we are a camera on college and building connection by seeing each other. So all our classes are recorded, as you will hear that beautiful voice come on and explain that to you. And class participation, we love to hear from you. Please use Zoom reactions buttons to put your hand up. So we've all gone through where those Zoom reactions are. Microphones on mute, please. Please remember to keep your microphone on mute unless you need to ask a question or contribute to class discussion. We have respectful relationships in class, so be kind to each other and respect everybody's opinion. We're all learners and in this together. Trigger warnings. Looking after yourself is key to longevity within the industry. So if you feel triggered, it's crucial you access your personal supports in here. Just put your hand up or send me a message, a direct message. That would be fabulous. Okay, let's go into this then. Let's have a look at this next slide. Okay, so work legally and ethically. And by the end of this session, you will understand the sources of legal and ethical information specific to work role, NDIS, rights and responsibilities of workers, employers and clients, privacy, confidentiality and disclosure, and informed consent. All right, session 1 here with those fabulous looking folders. Let's look at this. So society has experienced intense change. In the community services, mental health and counselling sectors, things are changing rapidly and I believe for the better. Let's take 2 examples of that. We have aged care legislation and the new Aged Care Act 2024. Now, this has been in the pipeline since the Royal Commission, and it has been, well, it's meant to be out by now, but there were in some cases, I was at a meeting, a Queensland Palliative Care meeting the other week, 2 weeks ago, and they were explaining that it is still on hold because they need to have some discussion around some of the areas in there that they wanted changed and altered in some way. Okay, so that's still going on at the moment. It was muted to be around July. I think that's been put back till after August now, but things change. Things change in this industry very, very fast. There's also a new Mental Health Act coming out and a Mental Health and Wellbeing Act that is also being re-looked at. With the huge amount of money that the Australian government have put into the mental health area, there are changes that are being discussed in various meetings. I was at another meeting a couple of weeks ago as well. It seems like all I do is go to meetings. But I was in another meeting some time ago as well, and that was really regarding the area of intervention, suicide intervention. And there was a lady there who was actually, when she looked at her phone, she just got an email through to say that that they had just received some more funds, even though that was before budget. Some of the funds had been let out prior, and she was then had another 12 months on her contract, which is pretty fabulous. Okay. So the Australian government is responding to the needs of elders and people in need of mental health care. But as we all know, there is a long, long way to go before that. So watch this space. Let's go into the next frame now. Okay. All right, we're going to look at some standards and some legislation, codes of conduct, etc. All right, so legislation. So legislation, the process of making or enhancing laws in Australia. Okay. Now, with the legislations, we can also have codes of conduct, codes set by organisations and services by which employees must conduct themselves in their role. Now, various sectors of the industry have codes of conduct. The aged care industry has code of conduct for support workers. That is, you can access that on the aged care quality and safety website. And also, if you're looking under NDIS, who in partnership with your organisation as well, will have codes of conduct for their support workers, also case managers, etc., employees. And when we look at industry standards, those are standards set by peak industry bodies for accreditation purposes across Australia. And again, we have the aged care standards. Now, they have just been re-looked at as well. We have standards for mental health in the area of mental health, and there are standards set down by peak industry bodies for all the areas that we work in. Policies and procedures, number 4, policies and procedures, they inform the day-to-day procedures to be carried out in the job role. So, for example, mandatory reporting procedures. So when we've got policies and procedures. So the policy is something that is set down and derives its basis or its form from legislation and from industry standards. And the procedures then explain to us how we put into place the policies. And also under procedures, we then have processes in that place as well. So if you think about it, that the procedures are explaining how we work out the policies, and the processes and the strategies come under that. So they're a guide to how we do our job, how we stay within our scope, and we're going to talk about that later, and how we enforce and we work within our duty of care. Just teasers for some of the things coming up shortly. Okay, so these are sources of legal information in the workplace. And as I said, look, there's no place there for trainer, like sources of legal information for the workplace. I am a resource, like your trainers are a resource for you as well. But look, some of the key points here are that employers must provide information to their employees and contractors regarding their legal rights and obligations while in their employ. And the legal rights and obligations of employers, the sources of information about these rights and responsibilities are contained in the policies and procedures and the codes of conduct and the national employment standards and the employment contracts and appendices and awards or enterprise agreements. So there's a good bit of bedtime reading for you. Now, the policies and procedures, the code of conduct, your awards, your employer will give you, or you have to have access for that, okay? So you need to be able to have access to be able to read those, and they must be available to you. You have your employment contract and your appendices. And you can also ask for more advice and information from your wonderful HR department, okay, and staff and your union reps. If anybody has joined the union, then you have unions that cover those specific areas, okay. So if we look at that template there, or that design there, or that chart, for want of a better word, you can see that on the middle, there's the information, and on the outside is all the areas that you can get that information from. Of course, your supervisors, directed from ex-supervisors, or you might be part of a RTO Facebook group, you might be part of a trainers and assessors Facebook group. There is one on that we all use all the time. We all go in and jump in there when something new comes up. You've got your professional development in there that will keep you up to date. And in all your areas, in the areas that you work in, or your jobs that you might do, you need to update your professional development continuously. So some organisations actually put time away for you, and that's part of your contract. Others will support you in going to conferences or seminars. A lot of these are online, so that you can get the evidence that you've been to that, and that provides the PD. That will also be involved and will be part of your file, your work file, your employee file with your employer. Okay, so think about this as a discussion. What are some of the examples of the policies and procedures that you work under? So we're going to have a short discussion about that. So some of the policies and procedures that you work under. Now think of it, think of, if you're not in the industry at the moment, think of some of the policies and procedures that you will run into or work under in your present job. What sort of areas do you do that? Okay. Okay, let's come into the next slide here. And we're looking at, I can't move my mouth today. We're looking at sources of legal information, or coming from federal, so coming from government. Now, we're looking at the Fair Work Ombudsman. Now, this is a really excellent website you can go to. The key points there are these regulators have accessible information on websites and through helplines. You can also look there and you can contact them. They're very, very easy to contact. The Fair Work Ombudsman helps everyone in Australia follow the laws that make all workplaces fair. So you can have a look in there. You can see then you must always check up, on Fair Work to see exactly where you're sitting regarding your rate of pay. Are you under the award that you're under? Are you getting paid correctly on that award? It's always good to go in there and check that nothing has changed into this one here. Okay, you've got the Australian Human Rights Commission, and that comes under the Human Rights Act. You can have a look at that area there, and I would really recommend that you keep a folder on your desktop that's entitled Toolbox. And in that toolbox, you put documents in there that have definitions in them, that have all types of information in there. You might put websites in there with a slight analysis of what's within that website. Definitions of things, or the definitions we're going to go through today, most definitely, because in a lot of courses, you have those same definitions that will be required. So if you are able to keep a log of those, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay. And while I'm on that, I want to just talk about referencing as well in this area. So if you're going online and you go to a suitable website, not one that's, .acme website or .imlappy website, etc. But if it's a .gov.au or a .edu.au or a relevant and most wonderful website, then if you could just reference the material you have from there in a link, just at the bottom of your questions, or just so something that we know that you have actually got that information from that website, but you do know that you have to put it into your own words. Like plagiarism is something you cannot do. We cannot do plagiarism. If it is something like a direct quote from that website, then yes, and you can reference that. Or if it is a definition, then yes, you want to make sure that definitions is true, but you can state where you've got that. In a lot of cases, I use quotes from people, or I will use quotes from clients, because using quotes from clients in those specific areas when you are looking back at a situation or an incident can give a lot more information about what has happened, because we would know, or the staff or employees would know in particular, that client, and you can actually state things in there that you wouldn't be able to put into a factual account. But we're going to go through that further on when we look at the documentation area as well. All right, well, I'm going to let you read the rest of that particular area there while we keep going and progressing in this to the next slide. So how's that? We've got the Fair Work Commission there. Now, Fair Work work under the Fair Work Act 2009, and underneath that is the National Employment Standards. So there are 10 National Employment Standards, and I know you all want to rush to look at them. We also have, you know, the national minimum wage orders as well. Look, so there's the link there for Fair Work. Now, if you go in there, as I said before, please check everything. Please check that you are working under the right entitlements, that you're working under the right umbrella. Yeah. So the National Employment Standards, or NES, because we all work in abbreviations, are the minimum employment entitlements that have to be provided to all employees. So that's where you can have a look and see whether you've got your entitlements there or whether you need to discuss that further with the people involved. And as we said for a couple of slides back, we looked at the HR department in that area. Okay, so this is what is the Fair Work Act. And so this is a video here. So I am going to let you watch those videos yourself. Just make some notes of those videos there. So we're unable to put the video on recording to send out for you for certain reasons, but we do supply you with that. So enjoy that, working through that area there. And don't forget to put those notes in your toolbox. One of the other things, while we're just looking at this slide here before you go and watch it, one of the other things that might be a little tip in sometimes with working with courses is that, or in qualifications, is that when you go online to work on your assessment, it's a good idea to have a backup of that. So in one case, a student told me that she was left underneath her desk in the fetal position sobbing because her work wasn't backed up. So you don't want to go to that extent that you need to lie underneath your desk in that position. But what I can suggest is that you have a Word document and that you have the question, put the question on the Word document, put your answer underneath that particular question. So you've got some time to think about it. You can come back later, work on it later, find some new research, etc. So put your answer down in that on the Word document. And then when you've finished putting all your responses down, or you can feel happy with them, you don't want to change them, then we can look at transferring, copy and pasting those over into your online document there. It makes it a lot easier because you've got a copy of that, and you also can go back to that, and you can also keep it within your toolbox. So if there's a situation in that you have within your working life that you think, oh, how did I do that? I know I had a question about that. You can go back into your toolbox and you can find that, and you see exactly what you wrote in there. You also, so if your question or response may be marked incorrect, you can also change that on your Word document as well. Okay, so keep a history of what you're doing, because this is an area that, especially within legal, that is very litigious. I say that word often, but it's an area that that we work under an extreme amount of legal requirements. Okay, so this is not a democratic sector we work in. So it's not as if you can say, oh, well, look, I've looked at that. I think I can possibly do that another way. Let's give it a try another way. It doesn't quite work like that. We need to follow the policies and procedures. So keep saying that to yourself. This is your new mantra. Always follow your policies and procedures. Always report and document. Documentation is your best friend. Documentation is the person that you go out with and stay with constantly. Always, always back up your documentation. I know. And I tell you what, the first time you don't is the time that you will make sure you do it always again. Report and document, okay? So they go together like, I know we said they go together like tequila and lemon, yeah? But there's a lot of things that go together, and we'll get to some more of those examples later on. But don't forget that report and document policies and procedures. Work within your organization's policies and procedures, and you must always work within your scope. And we are going to talk about that very shortly. So I bet you can't wait for that. All right. Okay. So we've watched this, this video on what is the Fair Work Act, and we really enjoyed it. And now we're going on to the next. Okay, and we get to privacy and confidentiality and disclosure. One of our favorites. So this isn't a couple, this is a 3 people here. So privacy, confidentiality and disclosure. All right, let's have a look at this. Okay, so in the middle of there, we have the privacy law in Australia. All right. And we have coming out from there on the upwards position, heading towards the sky, is personal information and health information. Okay. Privacy law in Australia. Over to the right, I don't know whether I'm right or left in this one or how you're reading it, we have client confidence, and we also have breach of duty of confidence there and remedies for privacy breaches. On the left, we have justified disclosure, and we have mandatory reporting there as well. Okay. So we have privacy and confidentiality. One of the ways that we can think of those definitions there is that privacy is about the person. You know, it's about the person. And I would think my students say, well, P starts for privacy and P starts for person. So privacy is about the person, and confidentiality is about the data about the person or the information about the person. Okay. Confidentiality is about data and protecting that data. Okay. So we're going to discuss the following information in regarding to privacy and confidentiality. Okay. So the privacy law in Australia, the Privacy Act 1988, don't forget that, 1988. I seem to remember that at dinner parties. A bit unfortunate. Is the principal piece of Australian legislation protecting the handling of personal information about individuals, about the person, okay? So this includes the collection, the use, storage and disclosure of personal information in the federal public sector and in the private sector. So what is personal information about the client? What client information is personal or confidential, sorry? Yeah, absolutely. So someone's name, you know, someone's name is personal information, their address, their financial information, phone numbers, medical information. What else is there? We're going into a breakout room shortly to discuss even more of that, but we can't record in a breakout room, so we'll just continue on with that. So what is an example of how this information could be breached? How could the information, that private information, be breached in this instance? So yeah, it could be left lying around. You know, oh, look, I'll just leave this guy's bank statement lying around, or we'll just leave that lying around. We can tell people at dinner about a client. And this is actually a true scenario that it was in a bowls club. And there was a large table of people who worked at the same organisation, and they were having an absolute rip-roaring time there. and they were having, you know, drinks, one on top of the other. They were having a wonderful night out. And as always, which happens, and I know, you know, you're told so many times you do not discuss your work with anyone else, but as happens, they began to discuss certain clients with certain information while they were out. Now, unbeknownst to them, on another table was the Don's neighbour, the director of nursing's neighbour. And she then reported back to the Don, as she was apt to do. So, yeah, so that wasn't a very, very pleasant outcome to that particularly long night there. So you cannot discuss information about your client with anybody that does not need to hear it. Okay, that is a need to know basis. You cannot do that. When you're carrying hard copy files, for example, you must carry those files with pointing in, so they're not pointing out, so people can't read them. You can't do that. Working in disability and areas such as mental health, you know, some of those clients can be easily identified by their illnesses and their issues. And so this also, you know, would breach their privacy and confidentiality. Okay. So anything that you feel look, a lot of the time it is just go straight to do not pass go. Just don't talk about it. Okay. You cannot discuss anything of that nature. So what could the breaches, what could the consequences of these breaches be? What is the outcomes? What is the consequences? Yes, it's damage to reputations of the client, you know, the support worker and the organisation. The organisation's reputation there is that they have spent thousands and thousands of dollars building and many hundreds and hundreds of employees building as well. There's the reputation of the support worker, and also, most importantly, the reputation of the client as well. Okay, now these can result in, or will result in, legal consequences as laws are broken. You have broken the law by doing that. You could be fined, you could lose your employment in this area, leaves you open to lawsuits from your employer, and you could be required to pay financial damages and possibly associated legal costs. So it's not looking good for you. So the best thing to do, well, the only thing to do is to don't do it. But in saying that, there are some instances where you can breach privacy and confidentiality. So when you can legally breach privacy and confidentiality, which means you can tell other parties or people information about the client. So one is when there is a threat to life. If suicide is threatened or attempted, or there is a threat to life of others, you know, as in a bomb threat, or someone may have a gun, or if a client tells you they have committed a serious crime covers offences such as drug trafficking, that's an interesting word to say, serious assaults, sexual assaults, murder and manslaughter. It does not include minor possession offences or any offences under the public health legislation. So that's one area there that you can breach it. The second area that you need to breach it is if a client is a child and is being abused or at risk of abuse. You can see your mandatory reporting guidelines on that. The third, if a child is under the age of 16 years and especially under the age of 14 years. Parents legally have the right to know what happens in counselling there too as well. Number 4 is making records available to the police if they have a warrant to inspect documents. Okay. And also if you're subpoenaed to court. So if the court subpoenas you for that information, then yes. And then and of course, responding to a request under the Freedom or Information legislation. Okay. All right, so there are areas, and there's always the instances where this needs to happen, as you can see, as you know. Okay, state and territory privacy and health record privacy. Now, these are the areas here that you can look at, that are areas that have your back in that area. And this is the information to support your role as an employee, as a support worker. So in that area there, we've got different areas there of different states. So have a look in there and find out what may be relevant to you in that area. Okay, I'm just going to have a sip of my tea here. Okay. Now, the national privacy principles here. So we're looking here in this area from the collection. So the collection of information. How is this obtained? This is what I want you to do. I want you to come out with the information regarding that, how the information about people is collected. How do you collect in your organization information about your clients? How do you do that? How do you provide the security and access to that particular information? And how do you use information and disclosure? How do you use that in what area? Is it detailed in any of the small writing there? If you've got a particular area there that you need clients to sign or tick or whatever, have a look and see what your organization, and it doesn't matter what organization you're working at this particular time. You might be you don't need to be working in the industry to answer this, because all organizations will have the ability to do this. How do you have identifying numbers? What is the quality of your data and your anonymity policies? I didn't think I was going to say that word. I'm quite pleased with that. Look at your security, your data security. What sort of protection do you have, and how do you protect against security breaches? Now, you might need to go to your IT department about that if you have an IT department. Okay. What about openness? Do you work? Is your organisation transparent? Do they have transparency within things? Do you have the ability, like if you're a national organisation, in that just going up to the transporter data flow, there's different laws and protocols for different states. So we can see when we get into more of the legal issues that you'll see that a lot of the states have different laws under that. And also in how do you update your client files? How do you actually do that? Do you have access to certain areas, or do you not have access to certain areas? How is that obtained, and how is that thought out? How does that come about? Now, how does your organization do that? Because when you understand how your organization puts together or manages these particular areas, you have more knowledge about how the industry works. Okay, now we've come into a different area here about informed consent, and we have another video here as well, which I'm going to jump over. I've learnt my lesson now after doing that with the first one. That didn't work. Okay, so we're looking now at informed consent. Okay, now some of the key points in this area here is that the industry is coming more responsive to the individual rights of the consumer or the customer or the client. Informed consent is becoming embedded in every step of the care and treatment process. So if we can define informed consent, or who can give informed consent and how is it recorded, we can look and see that the consumer, the client, or the family can give informed consent either by signing a document or verbally. Verbal consent is recorded in case notes and based on the policy and procedures of the organisation. So you can also get, and look, some organisations record, as it's stated there, verbal consent, but a lot of them will have a signature on it. Okay. A lot of the time there is, when it comes into clients who do not have capacity to consent, and that's an area we'll be looking at further on too. So a lot of areas we're going to be looking at further on too. So I want you to think about, why is this an important legal concept, informed consent? Why is it important? What does it do under the area of transparency? How does it sit in that area of transparency? Okay. You can look at that from the position of the client too. So if you I call them clients. I can see that there's a lot of different names for clients, customers, consumers, patient, whatever. But I always use the word client. All right, so have a look from the client's point of view. Why would the client want transparency around this area? Why would the client want choice? And the client has a right to have choice. We all have the right, except for people who are in prison, have the right to choice in some cases. Okay, and then they also have the right to choice in some legal areas as well. So I want you to think about that, and I want you to think about transparency in different aspects of care, and based on the information about what the care would be, or what benefits, what risks there are, what are the alternative options there. Okay. In disability, we worked in some areas there with CDC, and we called it client or consumer directed care. And that is based on the client's right to autonomy. And that's, if you want to look up that and see that definition as well, the CDC definition, then that will give you some insight into the importance of informed consent in this area. Okay. Now, I know you really, really want to watch this video. So what I'm going to do is just let you watch that, and then we will come back to a different area. In fact, there are 2 videos. So you get 2 for the price of 1. So you get 2 videos coming up. So make sure that you watch that, and please take notes again from those videos. That will help you in your work, in your assessments, and also it'll help with your knowledge and understanding in this area. Okay. I needed another sip of tea there. Okay, so you've had a good look at that. You've looked through those areas there that I suggested you look through. Always, always expand your knowledge. When you see an area that you're looking at, or you see a question, you think, I don't know a lot about that, and you've got your learner guide, but also expand your knowledge further in all these areas. You drive it. Like, you're here to learn, but there's no limit on learning. You don't reach your cap on learning. There's not a buzzer that goes and says, yep, that's it, you've done enough learning. Okay, on with something else. So expand your learning. I know you're doing a Cert IV in mental health in this area, but let's look further than that, and let's look at more information that might bring you up to look at the diploma level. When you've completed your Cert IV in mental health, you may only need a few more units to get to the diploma level. So we're always looking for that ability to have more information, more feedback, more experience in this area. Okay. All right, now hold yourselves back here, but now we're going to look at freedom of information here, and the Freedom of Information Act, usually known as the FOI Act here. Okay. So the Freedom of Information Act gives you the right to request access to government-held information. Okay, so the government holds all this information about you. as do many others, as we've found out when they have been hacked in certain ways. And this includes information they hold about you or about government policies, okay? So under this Act, you can access your personal information, policy-making document, and an administrative decision-making document. You can also ask the agency or minister to amend personal information about you, okay? So you can do that. You can, I mean, you might get hold of your personal information. You have to put forward a request about that as well. But you might look at it and say, well, that's not correct. You know, that's not my correct information there. So have a look at that and ensure that you are able to make sure that it is correct. And if not, correct it, because a lot of people will go by that. I think it's a little bit like getting your credit score in some cases, you know, you can, or rating, your credit rating, sorry. And you can go and access that area there. And you can dispute that if you wish to as well. Okay, now this, oops, I don't want to do that. Oh, sorry. There's sneaky things. Here's another one as well. That was another video. So with that man's head on it. So you'll be able to watch that as well. Get a little bit more information about this Freedom of Information Act as well, and a little bit information about how you can do it. This gives you control to of your life and where your information goes to. Now, this next video here, Know Your Rights, this comes from the Australian Commission on Safety and Quality, okay, and Healthcare. Now, this organisation and the site has a huge amount of resources on it, absolutely huge. So you can get many resources that may help you. So keep that link there and keep that link in your toolbox so you can go and see if there are any more resources that will assist you in your learning and assist you in your assessments when you're completing your assessments. Now, there's a lot of other websites, and I'm very, very happy to share those websites with you in a lot of cases. The website from the Royal Commission regarding, when I mentioned it earlier, the aged care quality and safety and quality website. So that is a huge amount of resources as well, and very, very easy to access. This actual website as well has, which is really, really interesting, has a register there of support workers that have been banned from working in the industry. And when you go onto this site, this particular register, you can see for how long, like you might, it might be, it's not in any alphabetical order. It's in the order of how they come, or it was last time I looked at it. So it's in the order of how they're put into this list. And not in any geographical area by any means, because of course everybody goes to their geographical area to see if they know anybody on this list. But now the last time I looked at it, it was quite extensive. It also tells you why they're on the list and for how many years they're on the list. So in some cases, it might say that they are banned or excluded from working in the industry for whatever, for like, or 5 years or 2 years or 1 year, or in that area. So we never had that before. You know, we never had that before in that industry. So if a support worker had breached a law or breached anything or went against policies and procedures of the organisation, whatever happened, if they were dismissed or left from that job, they could go directly over to the next provider and start work again. And that provider wouldn't have any knowledge about what had happened with this particular worker. Like they wouldn't have any history of what had happened. So those same people were allowed to work, or could work, not allowed to work, but could work in the industry in a lot of situations, in a lot of areas, because we can all work in a lot of areas. So Cert 3 and individual support is the minimum required to work in aged care and in some cases, well, hopefully a lot of places, in disability. So we can work within those areas, and a lot of people who work in aged care also work in disability, also pick up shifts in disability. And also coming into that and working with disability, disability has quite a huge umbrella of different areas that you can work in. So if you're going to work in disability, you can have the choice of working in spinal. So you can go online and you can look at the spinal unit or the spinal association. You can work in that area there. I know a lot of people who work with spinal. You can work in areas of disability, of physical disabilities. So you can work with people who are in wheelchairs, who use a lot of aids in that area, which you need to be taught how to use. You can work in that area. You can work in the area of mental health, which you're looking at doing. You can, which and a lot of cases to a lot of things. How can I say it? A lot of things. A lot of times that those areas overlap each other. Overlap is the word I was looking for. They overlap each other. So the skills that you learn, the basic skills that you can learn in these areas can be utilized over all areas. You know, they can be utilized in all different forms of community services and in healthcare. So the skills you might learn in your Cert III individual support, say in your area of manual handling personal care, ADLs, can be used again, of course, in hospital. So I know we have in the class as students, a lot of students that work in hospitals as AINs, and those skills still apply over that area. The organisation will train you in specific areas that qualification does not go into. So, for example, if you were working in disability, and if you were working in disability, this was actually someone that I worked with. If you're working in disability and you were working in the area of mental health, for example, and this particular client of mine was had an intellectual disability and a learning disability, but he also had diabetes, and he also was cared for someone, a family member who was bipolar as well. So the particular organisation I was working for at that stage trained me in how to look after the diabetes side of this particular client, and also train me to understand and have knowledge about bipolar. This particular client I had also taught in his school, and he had special in a special needs area, that's what they called it. So I also knew him and had worked with him for quite a long time, actually, in his school with his teachers. So I knew quite a bit about this particular client, but I didn't know about this area, and I was not told about this area. And of course, that's at the client's discretion, or at their guardian's discretion. So that was interesting. That was a very interesting night there. That was a emergency call to that area. So yeah, that was a long night. But when those sorts of nights happen, and where you don't know where they're going to lead, and they do lead to some critical incidences in some cases, or they might lead to an area that has not been experienced before, then you always have your organisation or your association to fall back on. And this organisation that I worked with at that particular time had a 24-hour phone contact number. So everybody took shifts to have that phone at any time of the day or night, so they could answer any questions and any requests in that area. Which there was a CO, a critical incident that night, and yes, they did need to be contacted to ensure that policies and procedures and processes were followed absolutely to the word, so that we were compliant, but so that we also could provide the best quality of care to the client and, of course, to their family member. So that was one area there as well. And as I'm sitting here looking at this slide that says "Know Your Rights," it reminded me of another client I had, and I have to have another sip of tea here. Excuse me for one moment. Even though it's cold, it's somewhat nicer cold. So this particular client of mine was an elderly lady. So she was aged over 85. Yeah. And of course she had a little dog. Of course she had a little dog. Excellent. A little dog with white hair. Of course it would be white hair when my car was specifically had black interior. Still think I've got some of those hairs in there. Okay, so this elderly lady, I needed to she's no longer with us, but this elderly lady I needed to pick up from a hospital, and to support her through a, how can I say this, through a time in her life for a couple of days that was uncomfortable for her. Okay. And in this, with this example, with this scenario, the elderly lady confided with me in some areas. So in just a few areas, actually, there was a few things she said that were just a couple of red flags to me, really. And I didn't, at that particular time, I didn't actually go into any detail or ask any questions at that particular time. Of course, I didn't know this lady very well. And obviously, I was really looking for more cues from her, like regarding body language, really, to that she would be comfortable in answering the questions that I had. And I could also ask those particular questions. Like, it was in my scope to answer, and my role to ask those questions. And it would be under my duty of care to ask those as well. So I could see that she was quite upset. And so she told me a couple of things, just a couple of things about the food. Actually, that was one of the red flags. And we had got her a really nice sandwich that she had asked for, full of all these fabulous things, like, gherkins and mayonnaise and all these fabulous things. I know this sounds really like, where is she going with this? But stay with me. Well, I tell you what, food is an absolutely wonderful communication tool. Absolutely. Food, music, wonderful in that area. So, and she said something like, "Oh my gosh, look at that. Oh my gosh, I haven't had something like that for so long. I haven't eaten food like this for so long." And I said to her, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean by not having that for so long? And that, or is there something that you are allergic to, or is there something that we should have had that detail in our brief, or is there something that you need to explain to me? And she didn't answer anything then, and she sort of just, kind of laughed it off and that. And I thought, oh, okay. Another thing that was a red flag to me as well was when she went. I said, "You're most welcome to go into the kitchen and make anything that you wish to with any of the food there. That if you see that you like it, please help yourself in that area. Help yourself to coffee. There's some fresh coffee there. I can brew some up for you if you want. You can have, latte or a cappuccino, whatever you want, whatever you need that is there. Please help yourself to it." And honestly, at that time, her eyes filled up with tears. And I thought, oh my gosh, I went straight to myself, like, what have I done wrong, as I always do. like, what have I done wrong? Have I said something wrong or whatever? And I said, oh, I'm very sorry if I said something wrong, if I said something to upset you in any way. And she said, no, I'm just not used to that. And I thought, oh, okay, all right, well, we'll keep going. And so we had a little bit of a chat later on, and it came about that she used to be a chef or a cook, whatever. At that time, so long ago, I think they called them cooks. And so I delved a little bit more into that, and I said, well, whereabouts were you cooking? Whereabouts did you do this? And it was all over the world. It was absolutely all over the world. So we went online, which she'd never been online before, and we went into YouTube, and she said, when she told me where she'd lived, I went on to that and what year she was there. So I went back on that, and I could find some black and white photos. I could find some maps, and she just loved that because she could see where she lived and what she did at that stage, at that time she was there. So, and she said, oh, when I worked there, I think that was in Panama. I think it was Panama around there. The favorite dish they liked of mine was this. And when I worked there in the Pacific Islands, the favorite dish that I did there was this. And off she went around the world, and she told me all of the best dishes that she had found there. So I know there is a point, stay with me. So in the end, what we did was we organised that she could get her recipes, and she was a little bit sort of reluctant there, but anyway, get her recipes, we all write them down, and we can get the recipes, and we can put that into a book for her, even if it's an online book, and we can put the areas that she'd worked with and a bit of her history, like an autobiography of I was here at this time, etc., and to make that for her nieces and nephews and her grandchildren, etc., because she talked about her nieces and nephews and grandchildren a long time. Okay, so she really liked that idea. Anyway, and we worked on that for some time, and then it was time to take her home. And this is the point I'm getting to. I know I've gone round and round to get to this particular point, but here we go. Okay, so I took her home, and it was down this long driveway, and it was amazing house. Like, it was right. It had an absolutely amazing view, etc. Gorgeous gardens, like everything, gorgeous. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is fantastic. This is great. This must be so nice for you to sit out here in the garden and sit in here, etc., etc. And anyway, I went in because I went in before her. She asked me to open the door, so she had a wheelie walker and that white dog, minus a few thousand white hairs. So I opened the door for her, and I walked through, into the kitchen. Was on the left, and it was gorgeous. And then there was a lounge room with great big glass doors that you could look out over everything. So I went through and I looked out the glass doors, and then I went and I sat on the couch. I did. I sat on the couch, and she just came in there because it took her a while to get through the door, and she didn't want any assistance. She was independent with her mobility, she said, and she didn't want any support in that. And we uphold everybody's independence. And she came through, and she said to me, like, honestly, her face just dropped. And she just looked frightened. And I thought, oh my gosh, what have I done now? And she, you can't sit there, you can't sit there. And I went, oh, okay, all right, okay. She said, no. And you can't be in here. You can't be in here. And I said, okay, where can I go? Where do I go? Where is this not your house? And she said, yes, but you can't be there. Okay. So in the long run, what happened was she was only allowed in one room of her house, which was I'd actually walked past it because I thought it was some sort of storeroom or closet, which was the smallest, tiniest little room at the back of the house with no real windows, with a double bed in there that just about hit both sides of the walls, with a television in there. And in the same room, she had her cooking, like a hot plate thing, a microwave. She fed the dog in there. She had a little sink in there, and like tiny, and a shower and a toilet, tiny, within this house. And she said, I'm not allowed past this point. And she pointed to like where the door to her little room was. And I just went, sorry? I thought I'd misheard something. And she said, I'm not allowed past this point. And I said, why aren't you allowed past this point? She said, my daughter won't let me past this point. And she lived with her daughter, and her daughter was, in my understanding, her carer for her. The house was hers. Okay. Yes. Okay. And so I had to, she liked to watch Home and Away, and she asked me if I could stay with her while she watched Home and Away, which I did, but she didn't have any chairs in there. I had to sit on the bed to watch it. And she also said to me, I don't have a phone. I can't ring anybody. And that was in answer to me to say, well, can you contact anybody when you need some help? Like if you're not feeling well, how do you contact people? I can't see a phone. She said, I'm not allowed one. I don't have one. Well, and I know this comes under people's rights to safety. This comes under breaching. I mean, how many laws can we see in this that has been breached, apart from duty of care? So what I did, follow your organisation's policies and procedures, as I will tell you to forever and ever. What I did was, of course, report that back to my organisation. I advised her of her rights because that is within my role as well and my scope. I advised her of her rights. She did not know that. She did not know her rights. I don't know how this happens. I really don't. But obviously it happens quite a lot. So I advised her of her rights. I explained it to our organisation. I did a report on it, explained it, and then I handed it over to my organisation to handle the rest of it, to take care of the rest of it. Follow policies and procedures. They deal with the certain departments in that area. Okay, that is the extent of my role in here. But I just want to go back over a few things. So it is within your role, and it is within your job, and it is with your training to observe people, to listen to their voice, listen to their tone, listen to their body language, look at the way they're dressed, look at their fingernails, are their fingernails clean or dirty, all of these things. Look at people's shoes. Shoes tell a lot about people, I can tell you that. There's a Freudian answer to that, but I'll save that for another time. Look at the way, look at the tone, look at people's tone, listen to the loudness. Are they soft, or are they loud? That can indicate a lot about the person. It's not sometimes what the person says, and I know I'm getting into the communication area at this time, but I can't help it. It's not what the person says, it's what a lot of the time they don't say. No. So using all of those areas there and knowing seeing the flags, observing the flags, knowing what they could mean, and asking knowing what the law is, knowing what people's rights are, because you can't tell people their rights if you don't know them in the first place. So part of your job is to know the rights of the people, or your industry in this case as well. Okay, so you can look, you can see there that it's the Australian Commission on Safety and Quality in Healthcare again, with that video. And I do believe there's some more videos coming up in this area as well. The next frame. So please look at that. Please keep a document with the rights of your clients in there, as well as your rights as a support worker, your rights as well as the client's rights. And of course, the organisation has rights as well, which we'll come into very shortly. Very shortly happens a lot here, doesn't it? Okay, so we're coming out of that and we're just going to just come into this area here, which is disability and the services of standards for people who work in disability. Now, don't think that disability just sits in this own little box by itself. Like, I think I'll go and work in disability. Okay, so I have to go over to this area to work in disability. It's not a standalone area. It can be in some cases, but disability is found in all areas of health. Disability can be a visual impairment. It can be visual disability. It can be a hearing impairment in some cases. It can be, the inability to physically do something. It can be the inability to mentally do something, or emotionally being able to assist yourself in some cases. So don't think it is only a standalone product. When we work in aged care, there are a huge amount of people in aged care that have a form of disability, an enormous amount. But we recognise this as not in some cases as pronounced as we would look at in the specific area of disability. Okay. And I went through a lot before of disability areas there. Okay. So looking at this slide here, which is in fact another video. So there's a lot of videos in here, which is good, because then it explains things to people who learn in different ways. And speaking about that particular area there as well, like learning in different ways, a lot of people learn by touching things or reading things or listening to things, or a combination of both. If you're interested in that area, it's called VARK, V-A-R-K. Have a look at that online and you'll see the different ways that people learn and the different ways that people understand and trust knowledge. All right, so looking at the slide again on disability, and after you've watched this, so it's NDIS that provides the funding to eligible people with disability to gain more time with family and friends, have greater independence, have access to new skills, jobs, or volunteering in their community, and an improved quality of life. The NDIS also connects anyone with disability to services in their community. This includes connections to doctors, to community groups, to sporting clubs, to support groups, libraries and schools, as well as providing information about what support is provided by each state and territory government. So if you want to go online to ndis.gov.au, and you can find all that information there that you require for the National Disability Insurance Scheme. Let's look at the national standards for disability services. So in the middle there, in that kind of dark purplishly circle, you've got 6 standards. And right up on top of that, we've got rights. So you have the rights of persons in the disability sector. To the right, you've got participation and inclusions. Then we have individual outcomes, feedback and complaints, service access, and service management. Okay. So organisations that provide services to clients under the NDIS must comply with these 6 standards. Okay. They come under the National Standards Framework. And if you go into that particular area again that I gave you that information, that website from, you will be able to see that particular framework for the national standards. And we will have a discussion about that next week at next week's Wednesday session. Okay. All right, so this is an area here that I would like you to do your research on. I want you to look at one national standard, and I want you, it says present to class, but I want you to be actually write some information about that, get some information, do this, when we ask this, like I just went all around the place there, but when we ask this, think of the what, when, who, why, whatever there, and actually write it to that. So look at the one of the national standards, and you can click through on there. That why, how did it come about? How did the standards come about? What does that particular standard that you are looking at, what does it present? What are the positives in this? What does it actually do? How does it benefit the client? How does it benefit the carer? And what are their rights in this area? And what are the rights of the support workers in this area as well? Okay. Just have a quick, I don't want, war and peace or anything, just make some dot points on that. Just some quick dot points on that you find that are relevant to that one national standard. And we will talk about that next Wednesday in class 2. I'm going to leave it up to you guys to come in the class and say, remember you said that we were going to do this, we had to do that a standard presentation, or write some put dot points down on it. Okay, so I'm using you guys there, relying on you to do that. All right, that's great. Let's look at the next one here that we've got up here. All right, so these are some of the consequences of the breaches of those areas. So again, you've got legal action. Again, you've got fines, enforceable undertakings, and jail for the employer, person in control of a business or undertaking, PCBU. Always have to stop and think, well, that's the only one that I need to go, oh, what was that again? So enforceable undertakings in jail, for that particular person, and dismissal of the support worker. And we can all of us can look back to those videos or those scenes on television where we saw clients in the disability area being abused or having a particularly horrible life under the auspices and care of so-called support workers and organisations. We can all think of that. And this is again where I'm going to come back with that not a lot of people know what their rights are. Okay, not a lot of people understand them as well. So the key points in this is that legal action can be taken against the organisation and the individual support worker. And that varies depending on the severity of the breaches. The state WHS regulator takes legal action against the employer or the person in control of a business or undertaking on behalf of the state and the injured person. Okay. So now we get into some of the disability organisations. So we've got National Disability Services, which is the peak body, non-government disability services and organisations. We've got People with Disability Australia, First Peoples Disability Network Australia, National Ethnic Disability Alliance, and Women with Disabilities Australia. Children and Young People with Disability Australia as well. And those are the several bodies that represent and support the disability sector. They provide resources and professional development opportunities for workers and service providers. Okay. And there are websites, obviously, to assist you in this area too. Okay. The next one of my favourites, my very, very favourites, is duty of care. Going to have another sip here. Okay. Now, duty of care we use 3 words as well. We use do no harm. So when we think of duty of care, if we think of the words do no harm, we can then see that it's do no harm to everybody, really. But let's get back into this area here. Duty of care goes together with dignity of risk. They both balance each other out. We're going to talk about dignity of risk later, but duty of care and dignity of risk go together again, like tequila and lemon, or has someone suggested gin and tonic. In that area there, we can look at just let me click this here. Oh, that's very good, isn't it? So we can look at the definition here. Duty of care is the legal and I think moral responsibility to protect the safety and well-being of others, which includes taking all reasonable steps not to cause foreseeable harm to another person or their property. Okay? It is everyone's obligations. So think again to do no harm. So it's a legal and a moral responsibility to protect the safety and well-being of others, which includes taking all reasonable steps not to cause foreseeable harm to another person or their property. Okay. I like that thumbs up kind of thing happening there. And again, we know the term as do no harm. So let's have a look at this. Let's break this down a little bit here. So duty of care, reasonable care may depend on reasonable. We've got to understand that word reasonable. I don't use that word often, but does that mean that I'm not reasonable? I don't know, but it's a word that I don't really use often. But let's look at reasonable under a legal type of area there. So reasonable is like another word for that is normal, and I don't use that a lot either, but we'll get down to that later. So reasonable care may depend on the worker's experience and the worker's training, and of course the worker's qualifications. So your duty of care differs if you are a support worker, differs to a clinical nurse or a registered nurse. So it depends on the qualifications. And again, it depends on the worker's experience. And again, it's the worker's training. Okay. So it depends on that. And also they've got here, it depends on the age and capacity of the person to whom the worker owes a duty of care to. I'm thinking that's quite an interesting statement there, and we've gone into that a little bit further on. Okay. So then the next dot point kind of explains reasonableness. So generally, reasonableness is determined by considering what a group of ordinary peers, like ordinary is like normal. What is an ordinary person? What is a normal person? If someone could explain that to me, I would be very, very appreciative. Who would see as reasonable in a given situation and taking into account the circumstances mentioned above? Okay, so that's reasonableness. I've always thought this is a pretty grey area legally when people use terms like that, but I am assured from the legal industry that they do not see it like that in some cases. Okay. So what is duty of care? So we know this term as do no harm, as I've said. So what is duty of care? If we go back to that original one there, we know that you have a duty to ensure the safety, and not only physical safety, it's emotional safety as well. And we could look at the mental health of those people around you, may ensure the safety of the people that you work with, the client, your organization, the client's family, that it comes under your duty of care, okay, dependent on your scope. So when we look at the worker's experience and training and qualifications, and then we look at their scope, that falls within their scope. So if we have a look at what your scope is, and that's usually contained within your contract. In your contract, this is what you are responsible for. This is your position description, which is part, which is your scope. So let's have a look at scope a little bit further. So we always work within our scope or practice of scope, and that can be defined as the term scope of practice, or SOP, there's another three-letter word, refers to the limits of a health professional's knowledge, skills, and experience, and reflects all tasks and activities they undertake within the context of their professional role. So is it within your role to perform a heart transplant or a leg amputation or complete a psychiatric assessment? So is that within your role, or is that within your scope of practice to perform that? Well, no, and we hope not. So this is where we need to look back and see what your experience, training, and qualifications are. So we always work within our scope. We cannot go out of our scope, okay? We cannot do that, except, and there's always going to be an exception, isn't there? Except in certain circumstances. So for, and under the direction of a superior. So let's take an example of that. And I'll bring policies and procedures and processes into this as well. So I worked with a client called John, and John was a very large gentleman, And John, his background was, he worked in the coffee plantations, and he was in charge of a coffee plantation. So he owned coffee plantations, and so he had a lot of staff. He had a lot of butlers, and he had a lot of maids, and he had a lot of help in his previous life, in his work with coffee. Okay. So John also had, this was in a secure unit, and John also had very progressive Alzheimer's disease, and probably sits there 7 stages to Alzheimer's, and he was probably sitting at around 4 at that stage. I think that's what we set him at. Okay, there's a lot of other things I can tell you about John, but I'll be doing that another time because it involves body systems. But anyway, so John also was extremely unhealthy. The weight he had, he was very ruddy complexion. He got short of breath when he wasn't us, thinking that we were part of his maids and telling us what to do. But at this particular night, there was 2 of us in John's room, or 3 of us, sorry. There was me and a couple of RNs that were in the room, and John's feet needed particular medical or clinical attention. So John was actually asked to stand up at this stage, and he stood up, but then John just sort of clutched his chest and started to slide down. So, automatically we thought this, oh, he's having a heart attack. So what happened was that everything at that stage needed to be seen as a critical incident or an emergency. And what we did was we managed to get John on the bed in a very unmanual handling way, believe me. And at that stage, we had 1 RN working on that. The emergency was called. And at this stage, we needed to get him up the bed. Now, we did not have a slide sheet or slide sheets with us. And slide sheets are large pieces of very slippery, nylon-y type material. Think of the size of a bed, and think of the material that size of the bed. So you need 2 of those for best practice. Excuse me. And what you do is that you roll the person. There's a particular way that you put a person on top of those. We call it rolling. You need 2 people to do that. You need 2 people to work the slide sheets as well. So 1 on each side. So we got John onto the bed, and we didn't have the slide sheets. Okay. So what we did there is that we did have, and this comes back to body systems, we did have an enormous amount of black plastic rubbish bags. So what we did in that situation very, very quickly, is that we grabbed a huge handful of these black plastic rubbish bags, and we put them down on one side, and we used the black rubbish, it's hard to say, black plastic rubbish bags as slide sheets. But we had to use several, believe me. And we used them in a way that they've never been used before, and we managed to get him up onto the bed, and we managed to get him into a comfortable position that he was available to be helped and assisted clinically in this time. So what I'm actually getting to here is that I was outside of my scope at that particular time, but I was being directed by a supervisor. The CN was there as well. She came in very shortly afterwards, and we just did everything that could possibly get a best result, and used anything that we could possibly use to get a best result at that time. Okay. So there are times that we can go outside a scope of practice, but only with direction. You know, if there wasn't a supervisor there, if there was only support workers there to work with on that situation, we really need to look at what we would do in that situation as well, and if we knew what to do. But that comes after a debrief after that particular thing. Okay. So at that stage there, yes, we did work outside our scope of practice. And yes, John did live. He actually went to hospital at that particular time and did come back some time after that. Okay. All right. So coming back to looking at the term for duty of care and being reasonable about it, I just thought I'd throw that word in there because I said I never use it a lot, and now I'm going to use it all the time. I'm going to use reasonable and normal all the time. Let's look at this part here where it says at the age and capacity of the person to whom the worker owes a duty of care to. Let's look at that. So what do you, how can I put this? What do we mean here? What do we mean by capacity? It's not the amount someone can drink. No. So what is that? Okay. Capacity. What is that? Okay. It's a legal term. In Australia, the law recognises a person's right to control their own lives, and people are presumed to have the capacity to make decisions for themselves unless proven otherwise. Okay. So you have the right to make choices about your medical treatment and put legal agreements into place and to ensure that your wishes are followed. You have the right to do that when you have capacity. Now, capacity is a person's ability to understand the nature and effect of decisions freely. They must understand them freely, like they can't be forced into understanding that. I'm not quite sure how you do that, but anyway, freely and voluntarily to make decisions. They must have the ability to communicate those decisions in some way, okay? So a person needs to have capacity or the understanding of how they make decisions and understanding the decisions. They must have the capacity to know that. Right. Now, capacity is determined by a medical officer, a doctor, etc. So capacity is can be diagnosed or put into place by the doctor. Can't quite get that right word at the moment. All right, so that's capacity. You need to have capacity to sign certain documents. You need to have capacity to understand what they mean. You need to have capacity to understand and to make choice freely as well. All right. We will go into that a little bit more next week too, because capacity comes into a lot of areas and it comes into a lot of legal areas. So with capacity, we need to look at such things as, especially when a client comes into care, is an advanced healthcare directive, living will. What does does the client needs to have capacity to sign that with the doctor? So a client, the advanced care directive will be in their file. They need to have capacity to understand DNR, all of those particular things there, a do not resus area. So this is a very, very important area that you must understand and that you must know. It's an area where there's really no going back on, if you understand that this is an area that you have to be right in this. Okay, so there's capacity. So the client has an understanding of these areas. Okay, but then there's the other side of it. There's impaired capacity. And this is when a person can't do these things. Impaired decision-making capacity may be due to an intellectual disability, an acquired brain injury, an ABI, mental illness, cognitive impairment, a form of dementia. So you need to know this in this area. Like if we take an example of, say, a person with a form of dementia, and there's many forms of dementia, and you can have more than one form of dementia at the same time if you're very lucky. So if you look at a client who has just been diagnosed with a form of dementia, and this client at this stage still has capacity, still has the understanding of these areas that they need to be able to have capacity. Okay, so they still have capacity. Now, they will be advised that they need to get their paperwork and their documents in order while they have capacity. They will be advised of that. So they need to get their will in order. They need to get their advanced healthcare directive in order. They need to get whatever else, their enduring power of attorney in order. They need to have that all up to date. They need to have that all signed. They need to have whatever insurance documents they've got. They need to get that all in order while they have capacity, because the progression of the illness, and it's progressed at different rates with different people, as you all know. Everyone's unique. With the progression of that illness, they will lose capacity as the illness dictates. At this stage, no one yet, I believe, has found or determined a resolution or a magic pill in that area. So an appropriately qualified health professional can determine impaired capacity. If a client does not have capacity, do we still have a duty of care? So if the client does not have capacity, do we still have that duty of care? This opens a huge area here, which we're not going to get in today, but we will look at in the course at some stage. When does the client, I'm going to explain this. If we look at certain areas that a client doesn't have capacity for, it means that they have no intent in that area, if that's the right word to use. I'm just thinking, I'm just trying to get you an example here, but leave it with me. I'll come back with it. Remind me of it. Okay, so, but the client still has rights. Of course, the client has rights. The client has right. If the client does not have capacity, and say, for example, the client makes a complaint, about a certain support worker or something, the organisation still has to investigate that. The client still has that right to do that. Yes, we still need to take into consideration the illness and the lack of capacity in this area, but we still need to. The client will still have rights, you know. The client has a right to a place to live. The client has a right to fresh water. The client has a right to food. The client has a right to warmth. The client has a right to for medical support. The client still has rights. The client still has rights to live without abuse, both physical, financial, sexual, neglect. The client still has that right, still has those rights. Yes. Okay. Don't think because of certain illnesses that the client loses their rights. They do not. Okay. Let's look at the training area here underneath. So you've got reasonable care may depend on the worker's experience. Yes, we know that. The worker has a Cert IV, they have in this area, whatever. Let's look at workers' training. So under duty of care, your employer has a duty of care to train you to complete your position, to be able to do your position, to be able to work within your scope. The employer has a duty of care to train you in that area. So, you know, I was talking about the client before that had diabetes. So if a worker went to work with a client with diabetes and the client needs their BSL measured, not the workers, but the BSL measured, but you have no idea how to do this, and your employer hasn't trained you in that, well, then yes, your employer has breached duty of care. If you are rostered onto a secure unit, for example, and you've never worked in that unit before with clients with different forms of mental illness, you've not had training in this area, you don't have the qualifications in this area or the experience, who has breached duty of care here? Okay. Both, really. You have a duty of care to advise your employer that you don't have this particular training in this area, and the employer as well has a duty of care to train you in this area as well. Okay, I hope that's clear. I hope that is quite clear, because this is a really, really important part of our work. It's really, really important. If I can say really again, that would be great. Okay, and we will always come back to this. There's many, many times we will be talking about something in another unit and we'll come up with duty of care. What is your duty of care in this area? Okay, let's look at this. All right. So with duty of care, we have a duty of care to everyone. So let's read this. It may also depend, duty of care may also depend on a person's position within the organisation. Yeah, we saw that. In a role as a supervisor, you're likely to have a higher duty of care than that of a casual support worker. Yeah, we got that. A person may well also owe a duty of care to their colleagues, their visitors to the organisation, and to the children and families of clients. Okay. Now, think of this. So you've got a duty of care. We know that. We kind of figured out what that is. So what about if you over here, so you're in the lunchroom and you over here, because everybody talks about everything in the lunchroom, don't they? So what if you overhear someone talking about how they breached duty of care? What if you overheard them say, I did this and I know this is a breach of duty of care and this is this and this? What if you heard that? What is your responsibility here? Okay, what is your responsibility? You've sat there and you've listened to this. They were so absorbed in what they were talking about, they didn't know that you were listening. What is your responsibility here? What is your duty of care here? Okay. What is your duty of care? I hear you say, you know, I have to report it. Yes, you do. You do have to report it. It's your duty of care to report it, or you're complicit in the breach, and this will incur outcomes. Look, you can follow your policies and procedures from that organisation regarding this area here of about, you know, if you have something that you could talk to the person who's said it. You can talk to other people about it. If you think that your organisation needs new training in this area, say, for example, abuse, then you can set that up. But you do have a duty of care to look after the people in there. And this is the way that you can look after them, but if you overhear it, you report it. And many, many times I've heard this, and I've seen it happen. I've been in areas that people have done something and an RN might say this, oh, now I have to report that. Now I have to report that. Or someone said that something to them and they've said, oh, well, you've breached duty of care and now I have to report that. And it's not about dobbing someone in. When you work in this area, the areas that we work into, you must realise that this is what you need to do. This is what you have to do. This is what your duty of care is. Okay. And if we're talking about the areas of abuse, then yes, you do have to do this. But this is looking after the safety of your clients, in which we go back into the original definition of duty of care. You will have followed doing that. Okay, I need another sip of my tea. Okay, now think about this. Oh, I can be so bossy sometimes, can't I? Okay, think about this. What if you were walking along the road and a person collapsed in front of you? Okay, just collapsed, like, fell on the ground and they were starting to go blue. What is your duty of care here? Okay, what is your duty of care? You're just going to walk away? You're just going to run in and start, pumping their chest, doing CPR? Are you going to ring the ambulance? What are you going to do? Do you have a duty of care here? Well, in Queensland and every other state except Northern Territory, and I say Queensland first because I am in Queensland, so I can do that. So in Queensland and every other state, which includes all of you, except the Northern Territory, you do not have a duty of care to help that person. In some cases, it's called bystander duty. There is no legal requirement. But what about a moral duty? Morally and ethically, it's called legal and ethics here. Do you have a duty, moral duty to do something here? Think about that. And of course, there are exceptions, as there always are. There are exceptions, of course, like if you were a first responder, if you were an RN, if you're medically trained in that, we get into the area of consent here. And I've saved that little beauty for later in the course as well. Okay, have a think on that one. All right, now we're getting to the areas here that we got lots of white space. So duty of care, and excuse me, I'm sniffing away here. Duty of care to self and others. So employees have obligations, that's you. You have obligations to follow policies and procedures for safety and health. You have obligations to ensure actions or omissions cause no harm to self or others, and you have obligations to raise concerns about health and safety. Okay. How can you meet this duty? How can you meet your duty of care? Do you have to carry around a definition with you in your pocket all the time and then look at it when you think that you may be coming up to breaching it? Well, we say it all the time, and here I go again. You must follow your policies and procedures. If you follow your policies and procedures, then you will be within your duty of care. Okay, one hopes. There are exceptions. I thought, I better put that waiver in there. You need to provide a safe work environment. You need to ensure safe use of handling and storage of machinery, structures, and substances. You need to make sure everything is well maintained, and you need to give workers any information on training, instruction, or the supervision needed to provide safety. Okay. All right, let's look at this one here. So duty of care, if you breach your duty of care and there is a resulting injury or death, well, it's not looking good for you, to a client or person in your care, the organisation might be sued if a staff member has failed to follow the organisation's policies and procedures, if it has broken the law, if it has clearly breached their duty of care. Again, looking at things in this area about duty of care is, have you updated your first aid? Have you updated your police report? You know, all of these things, these areas here fall into your responsibility as well. Okay. This is the employer duty of care to employees. Employers have a duty of care under common law and WHS regulations to ensure that no harm comes to employees at work. Remember those 3 words I said at the beginning? Do no harm. Harm includes physical and psychological injury, and reasonable steps must be taken to fulfill their obligations. The key points there are the law requires that an employer takes reasonable steps to ensure the safety of all employees, and they are obliged to observe a reasonable standard of care. Broadly speaking, employers are required to provide adequate safety information and equipment to their employees to ensure that the workplace is safe while providing adequate instructions and competent staff to carry out the duties, and to properly warn employees of any dangers in the workplace. Failure to adequately adhere to their statutory duties may result in an action against an employer. Don't forget psychological injuries as well. Just thought I'd throw that in just to, you know, make it a little bit more colourful. Okay. These are the state and territory WHS information because, you know, all states have different forms of information and laws and acts. Okay. All right, so the next slide here is this particular one here, and that is a video. So I'm going to let you look at that video yourself and enjoy it. We're coming now into children in the workplace. So, and this is interesting. I had an interesting conversation about this last week. All right. So children in the workplace are covered by WHS legislation. Policies and procedures must be in place to manage the risks of children in workplaces. And this might include supervision, the safety of children, like putting gates in. They must be supervised. Children must be supervised in the workplace. Okay, so Safe Work Australia shows children are a significant risk of injury and death. So especially, you know, for you guys at work in people's homes by yourself when children are present. So workers often enter homes where children are present. You know, clients may be children. Some of your clients may be children. Children may visit friends and family in residential facilities. You may take clients to places where children play. Special consideration must be made to protect the health and safety of children in the workplace. You know, why are they a particular risk? You know, because they're inquisitive, they're nosy, they want to explore, they don't understand risk. They don't know what risk looks like and they don't understand it. They may go places without permission. So when we think of children in the workplace and in the key points where it says children may be children, if you think like in some places you may have clients that may have a physical age, I think that's the way you put it, a physical age of probably in their 20s, but really have an intellectual age of maybe 9, maybe 11 years. It's interesting that, so that was my conversation, you know, does this look at considering those particular clients as fitting into this concept here, if I can use the word concept. Okay, so here we go. They've got to be supervised, told you that. They've got visitors should a visit should occur in an environment. You know, sometimes the environment you take children into can be quite confronting if you're going into, this is a mental health facility, but as well, but, you know, thinking of hospitals, thinking of mental health facilities, thinking of secure units, there are some pretty confronting sites there, you know, really confronting. And some of the things, you know, when I think back, there are things I can't unsee. There are things I can't unhear that I wish I could sometimes. You know, the visits will be subject to time limits. Here they go, saying the current state of the parent or whoever you are visiting should be considered before the visit commences. consideration of the child's age and maturity. Guardian or parent and staff must be present during the visit, and consideration of other clients in the facility and their current state of mental health. Okay, so those are what you consider. And in a lot of cases, there's ways of doing this as well. And the social worker in that area or whomever will have, there are plans to, I don't want to use the word acclimatise, but to prepare is a good word, to prepare children in some cases for what they may see or what they may experience. But this is an interesting area, and I would like to really look further into this area at another time. So I say that word "so" a lot, don't I? And I know I go a lot too. I'm trying not to do that. Okay, so this is the end. Oh, see, I just did it again. We've looked at some key learnings. We've looked at you making some notes about something, some dot points about something that you're going to tell me about next year. Do you like the way I said something? I asked you to go onto a website and put some dot points down. Any questions? You follow the policies and procedures of Hader Institute regarding the training area, and and we will address these in our session next week. So it's been a pleasure and a privilege to be able to do this. And I do thank Hader again, and I do thank Vicky from Hader again for her huge support and assistance to me and for me in this area. So I am going to say thank you, and I am going to say have a very good week here. And I will see you very, very soon. And stay well and stay safe.